Hello, and welcome to The Energetic Psyche, Season 3, Episode 9, The Labels We Carry and How They Shape Us. How the identities we inherit, adopt, and internalize quietly shape who we believe we are. I'm Dr. Adrienne Campbell, and I'm really glad you're here. Over the past couple of weeks in my new program, Power, Presence, and Flow, we've been exploring identity. One of the first questions we sit with is deceptively simple. Who am I? And almost immediately, we reach for labels. Leader, parent, introvert, helper, strong, sensitive, responsible, creative. Labels are one of the quickest ways we make sense of ourselves and one another. But the more we explore them, the more we begin to notice that these words carry weight. Some feel empowering, others feel limiting, and many of them weren't consciously chosen at all. They were simply given to us somewhere along the way. From the very beginning of our lives, we start acquiring labels. I often think of them like little stickers or badges that get placed on us as we move through life. Family, teachers, friends begin telling us things like, "You're so smart," and "that was very kind of you," or "You're so emotional," "You're the responsible one." Hearing these types of comments is actually essential to the development of our identity when we are children. And over time, we begin to internalize them as descriptors of who we are. As we get older, more labels get added. Maybe we start playing sports and become an athlete. Maybe we discover creativity and become an artist. Maybe we become the dependable friend or the one everyone comes to for help. Some of these labels come from others, some we assign to ourselves, and many of them follow us for years. Some continue to serve us well, and others quietly stop fitting. And unless we begin applying some discernment as we get older, we can end up stuck wearing labels that make us feel like imposters in our own bodies. When we accept a label either consciously or unconsciously as part of who we are, it begins shaping how we show up in the world. A person labeled the responsible one may grow into an adult who feels responsible for everyone around them. Someone told they are too sensitive may learn to tuck their emotional responses away. Someone who's praised for being strong may struggle to ask for help when they need it. Over time, the label becomes more than a description. It becomes a script for the role we play throughout our lives. A good friend of mine, Dr. Kaki Miller, has done a tremendous amount of work around labels. A big part of her research over the years has explored how labels shape identity, and she once led an exercise for us all in grad school that has stayed with me ever since. In that exercise, each of us had to choose a word, a label that had been given to us at some point in our lives, and then we shared it with the group. My word was smart. Most people in the room immediately saw that as a positive label, but for me, it wasn't. As a kid who had been placed in the gifted program and constantly told how intelligent I was, how much potential I had, the label smart came with a lot of pressure. It set me apart from other kids in ways that was often isolating. I felt different, sometimes lonely. And over time, I learned to downplay my intelligence just to fit in and make friends. What that exercise with Dr. Kaki revealed, not just for me, but for many people in the room, was that labels don't carry universal meaning. A word that feels empowering to one person may feel limiting or painful to another. Labels are powerful and personal to each individual. In Power, Presence, and Flow, we're exploring this idea a little further. Participants begin by identifying the labels they currently wear. For many people in their 30s and 40s, there's quite a few to sort through. Some labels were given by family, some were shaped by career or school, some emerged through friendships or relationships, and some came from moments of conflict. Maybe their labels applied by someone who was angry, frustrated, or trying to define us in a moment that didn't represent our whole self. The question then becomes, which of these labels do we still claim as ours? Which ones belong to someone else's story about us? And which ones may still be quietly influencing us, even though we no longer consciously agree with them? Because once we internalize a label, it begins shaping identity. It influences the decisions we make, the risks we take, the opportunities we believe are available to us. Sometimes it even shapes our sense of what we deserve. Labels can also become invisible boundaries. If someone believes, for example, I'm just not the kind of person who can experience wealth, that belief quietly shapes every decision they make around money. If someone believes I'm not creative, they may never explore artistic expression. Over time, the label becomes a kind of internal decision. It moves into the unconscious and begins shaping behavior from behind the scenes. And eventually, it starts to look like things are just always going to be that way. So the first step in changing anything is raising awareness. If you want to keep unconscious labels from affecting you, start by getting curious, raise your awareness, and bring them into the light. Ask yourself, what labels do you carry? Which ones came from you? Which ones were given to you? Which ones feel accurate? And which ones may have simply been stickers placed on you long ago that no longer fit your life and who you are? Raising your self-awareness gives you the opportunity to make a choice, to apply discernment to the situation, and decide whether or not these labels still belong. If you imagine labels as those little "hello, my name is" stickers, something interesting happens. The ones that don't really belong to us, that lack reinforcement, eventually lose their stickiness. With time and awareness, they fall away naturally. But the labels that are actively shaping our identity, or maybe they're being reinforced by someone close to us, tend to stick a little harder. Those are the ones that require deeper reflection. You might ask yourself, where did this label come from? Why did it attach to me? Is it still serving who I am and who I'm becoming? And if it isn't, what would it take to loosen its stickiness? And folks, this is where things start to get real. So I'm just going to take a moment to add in that this is deep work. As you explore these questions, you might find emotions coming forward that you weren't prepared for, or perhaps even memories that need to be held delicately and gently. What I ask of you is to please give yourself grace. Please reach out to a professional counselor or therapist if you find something that needs to be worked with. That's what they're there for. Therapists, counselors, they're there to be your companion and guide when navigating sticky situations, and sticky labels are no different. As you explore your labels, please know that this isn't a black and white process. Just because a label doesn't necessarily fit doesn't mean it needs to be tossed. Maybe it simply needs to be redefined to be owned by you. For me, my label that needed to be redefined was smart. As I mentioned, when I was a child, it felt isolating. I spent a lot of years downplaying my intelligence because I wanted to belong. I wanted friends. I didn't want to be the kid who was different. So I leaned into other identities instead. The goofy one, the playful one. And over time, this became exhausting because who was I kidding? I am smart. Pretending not to be meant I had to hide part of who I was on a daily basis, and it eventually wore me down. What I realized was that the problem wasn't the label itself, it was the imbalance. When I was a kid, I only had a few labels to carry, and smart overshadowed everything. But as I grew older and experienced more of the world, more labels were added, and being smart just became a part of who I was, not the totality of my existence. Today, being intelligent sits alongside creativity, humor, curiosity, kindness, and 100 other qualities that make up a whole person, that make up the whole me. It no longer defines me. It simply belongs to the larger picture. And that, I think, is the real work with labels. Not necessarily removing all of them, but allowing our identity to become more balanced, more spacious, and more fluid. It's about applying discernment, taking a moment to consider the labels you carry, which ones feel like authentic expressions of who you are, which ones were adopted long ago to help you belong, succeed, or stay safe, and which ones might be ready to loosen their grip. Because identity isn't a fixed description. It evolves. And sometimes the most meaningful shift begins with a quiet question. Is this label still mine to carry? Thank you so much for joining me. I wish you the absolute best in this life. If this podcast resonates with you, please be sure to subscribe so you can be notified of future episodes. I look forward to connecting in the future.